So we're talking here about students, student-to-student interaction, student-to-teacher, student-to-community, student-to-material, and student-to-technology. We're not talking about you. This is not about us as teachers. It's about how do we get that deeper engagement? How do we provide students with multiple opportunities to show that they can do things, acquire the skills they need, and then replay that to us, and using the technology to leverage all those good things that we do in the 21st century. Apologies for this one, it's a little bit small, but the reason that I've chosen this is because we're talking about now being more asynchronous. We don't have to prepare all of our lessons just to be delivered face-to-face. They can be done asynchronously or on demand, which means that if kiddies work better at 3 o'clock in the morning, good on them. If they work better at midnight, you don't need to be available for them midnight, because they can listen to that podcast, watch that video, interact with those materials at those times that are more meaningful for them, or where they're going to be most efficiently engaged in those particular products. So it's really important to consider, and this is part of why we use the tools. We're talking this afternoon about a student, or with a student who's not at school at the moment, who's here for a couple of days, and one person at this table in the science faculty who teaches this student said to the student, hey, why don't we use Skype when you're not here? Now, I know that it's been used in other areas of the school, like music, for example, languages, etc. So really simple tools that we can use. We can record those sessions that we have, and we can play them back, and the kids can play them back whenever they want. You didn't have to go away and make these new materials for the students. In fact, they are a byproduct of the class that you run every single day. So if we think about these approaches and the ways that we can do things in really smart ways, we can actually create a whole repository of stuff that we can use for our kids. The jury is out. Research suggests that teachers should implement blended learning when they want to solve specific instructional problems. There is no research that I have read that says that this is going to improve your results 100-fold, 10-fold, or by 2. The one thing that the research does tell me is that when you have certain instructional problems that you want to solve, that blending learning is going to help you do those things. And that was the nature of our discussion last time. That's where we want you to start your discussion this afternoon. What are those instructional problems that you have that this will help you solve? So, for example, we were talking with Taz about the fact that demonstrations are always a problem. Kids are away. We had to set them up. They're labour intensive. We do them once, and then 3 kids are away, 5 kids are away, and guess what? Got to do them again, or got to set up again, or we've got to try and do it again. Why not record those things? Why not have posters up on the wall where you can list out with instructions and pictures, and have a little QR code where the kids can go up with their device, QR code, it takes them straight to the YouTube video, and they can watch you do the demonstration, not just today, but next year and the year after and the year after that, if they're still appropriate. So very, very simple problems of practice that we can leverage from such a simple approach. And I'm sure that there are lots of problems that we had. We're talking to English about the fact that they get the same questions all the time, whether it's how do I teal this paragraph, or what is this Shakespearean concept that you spoke about in Year 7, I'm now in Year 10 and I still can't remember it. We can make these lessons and materials available to every kid at every point in time. Ryan said to me, why is it the kids learn about dimensions in health in Year 7 and they front up to our course in Year 11 and it's like they've never heard this concept before? Why isn't they can't keep their materials live so that they can keep looking at it, so when they come to look at what they've learnt that's appropriate for Year 9 and Year 10 and Year 11, etc., they can't just review a hashtag and find all that information. And they can review it at their particular leisure so that they can be prepared. So these things are never new. In fact, that they're something that they can review over. So these are problems that we can go into and think about and have a talk about. The other thing that the video raised was the question about differentiated instruction.
Oh, that's me.
That's you.
Frank's just spent a lot of time talking about blended instruction, and differentiation works hand in hand with that. And with some of the ideas that we're presenting to you, and some of you have already embraced, they're setting up situations for you that enable you to differentiate the way that you deliver content on a much more user-friendly way for both you and the student. So essentially, what's differentiated instruction? A lot of the time people presume, and please correct me if I'm incorrect here, that we're dealing with kids who are intellectually not as smart as the other group. That you've got a group of kids in front of you, you've got those really bright kids, the kids in the middle and the kids at the bottom. That's not necessarily always the case. Yes, you do need to be aware when you are presenting information that you've got kids who can keep up with your use of vocabulary, and then you've got another group who can't. And then you've got another group who really need to be extended. And that's pretty basic differentiation. But what about those kids that need you to deliver the information in a different way? So rather than you always at the front lecturing them, that you're giving them opportunities to see visuals, and you're giving them other hands-on activities where they're actually able to giving them opportunities to reinforce those contents and those ideas, those skills that you're trying to get them to learn. So differentiation works hand in hand with blended learning beautifully. We're really pressed for time. We want to give you as much time as you possibly can have. This particular presentation that Frank and I put together will be available on the staff website. There's a link directly there to a video. Essentially what this lady says in the 4-minute grab that she gives us are ideas about differentiated instruction, how you can operate and present it in the classroom. If we could just go to the next slide. Essentially, when you're dealing with differentiation, know that it's not just the delivery of content. Sometimes it's the process that the kids are needing to engage with. What are you doing in order for them to understand what it is that you need them to be able to do, which comes back to Taz with the julienne carrots. Products, you know, what do you want them to have at the end? Do they all have to be identical? Does the assessment task mean it must be an essay? Sometimes the answer is yes, but sometimes we can be creative and give them different ways to actually demonstrate that they have understood. So blended learning works beautifully with that. And of course, you're in learning environment. Kids, I don't know, I'm biased, they love coming to the art block because there's lots going on there. And it's a lot more free in terms of how they can move around the space. I like going into the language classrooms as well. It's bright, there's stuff up on the wall. If I can't remember how to say something, there's stuff there as well. And I know many other subject areas have those sorts of things that aid the students' learning. Think about the environment that we actually teach in to help the kids who don't learn in that one little pigeonhole that many of us sometimes just get tired and fall back into. We have to facilitate and engage them. And realistically, if you're thinking about Year 7, my experience is Year 7 are a totally different kettle of fish in terms of how I deliver information than how I would have taught as recently as 3 years ago. I've really had to change my delivery methods and opportunities for them to actually access. So differentiation basically will work hand in hand with what you're doing here with blended learning, and I think personally that it's only going to end up benefiting the kids and making your teaching life that much more interesting.
And there are some really cool resources in the teacher reference room from a guy called Michael Pohl that does a lot of this sort of stuff. He shows you how very easy it is, as Kerry said, to differentiate at every level here, whether it's content, process, products, and even by virtue of the fact that you change the first 3 that you actually change the learning environment. So look him up. He does some really good stuff in the way that he looks at the different products that people do. Also, what we're getting at is that a lot of our investigation, and if you've read the paper, you'll have a bit of a handle on this, is that really we're aiming for the tacky green in the middle, I suppose, is that nice sweet spot where what we do is we work out the appropriate pedagogy to enable us to deliver the content, the skills, etc. that we need to, and we use the technology to support that. It's not the other way around. It's not the technology leading the pedagogy which leads the content. Your syllabus tells you and your curriculum tells you what you need to deliver. You know how you need to deliver it. You're the pedagogical expert. But what can we leverage from the technology in order to deliver that in ways that are engaging or means that we put it back onto the shoulders of the kids and off our shoulders as well. And that's one of the things that we really want to aim for in the next sort of 12 months. In terms of your areas of activity, this gives us some nice ideas about where we go. We've already started with looking at some of the assessment tools available to us. So Turnitin, for example, Edmodo. In the coming weeks, we'll talk about blogs and wikis and all those good things if you've not used them before. And I do note that some of you have already started using blogs with students. And while we encourage that, we will talk about some of the perils and pitfalls a little bit later on. And together with our portfolios, our collaboration, we'll start looking at new ways of doing assessment with you, because that's really, really important. There's no point in doing what we've always done in our assessment programs if we're going down a new pathway here. So we'll talk a little bit about that and about the creation of our content as well, because that's very, very important. So what happens in our blended environment is that we tend to move away from a focus just on the summative assessment to a stronger focus on the formative assessment. So these are points in time assessments that we gather from the kids to work out how they're going. Again, it's a little bit sort of mastery based, it's a bit more competency based, it's a bit more, I hit this benchmark, I'm now allowed to move on, rather than, yeah, you just keep going through and at the end we'll find out whether you've actually learnt anything, and then at the end of that unit we'll move on to the next one, whether you have or you haven't. So the tools that we're going to introduce you to over the next 30 weeks will start to, I hope, will start to provide you with some opportunities to think about your assessment in slightly different ways. There's a nice article or a post on the weekend in Google Plus where New Tech and the Buck Institute have done a lot of work on PBL, are now starting to rethink their whole assessment. In fact, they're saying that maybe we shouldn't assess the final product. In fact, the only thing that we should assess is the kids' learning, not the product. And what do we normally do is we collect a product from the kids and we go, that looks like it's a B, that's well done. But we've not actually assessed any of the learning or the process that goes into the final production of that product. We collect an essay from the kids, and that's wonderful, we mark the product. But what about all the learning end-to-end that's occurred? Have we ever assessed that learning end-to-end? When do we assess that learning end-to-end? Do you collect from, or do you collect evidence from the kids for points in time to say, in order to complete this, I really need you to be at benchmark 1. There's no point in writing an essay, a 1,500-word essay, if you can't write a teal paragraph. When do we do those sorts of things? So the technology pretty much allows us to rethink the way that we do this formative assessment. If we're reading kids' blogs and journals, for example, we can collect that information on the go. If we're doing things like, perhaps a good example of this, and we'll find other assessments of this as well, where we can do assessments in points in time to gauge kids where they're at those particular points in time. If we expect kids to be able to show us certain skills at points in time, where do they acquire those sorts of things? And that's a really important thing that we want to do. So we are going to leverage this to move backwards. So less of the summative and more of the formative. In fact, the advantage of doing that is that we might have more tasks, they're smaller and they're quicker and easier to mark than the big summative tasks that we're prone to collect. And we'll look at ways that we can do this. There's lots of smart ways that we can collect these particular assessments. And there are some graphics there that you can have a look at. One of the things, obviously, that we do is that we assess before we teach. And one of the things that I've been reading a lot about is what happens to that pre-test. We do a pre-test and we find out what kids know, and then we go back to lesson 1. If the kids can do it, why are we starting at lesson 1? What do we do with that information? Quite interesting as well, because a lot of projects now are putting in a step here, which is an exit ticket. Before you're allowed to move on, you complete an exit ticket. If you've not achieved that particular benchmark at that exit ticket, you stay doing that particular work. And as we go back to Kerry's point, that's where we start to differentiate. It could just be that in your class, you do not have kids who are ready to move on to the next concept. And if it's a foundational concept, what's the point of them moving on anyway? There is no point. Again, I've put this up because I think it's worthwhile reminding you that we are looking at 4 critical skills: critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity skills. So when you're thinking and caging your problems this afternoon, I want you to think in those 4 domains. What are the problems that we have that we can leverage to implement some technology that allow students to show their critical thinking, to show their creativity, to show how they communicate with one another and how they collaborate. And collaboration and cooperation are 2 different things. So you need to look and think about collaboration as an iterative process. It's not a factory process where the worker puts a wheel on and the next one puts a headlight on. That's cooperation. It's not collaboration. We want to see iterative processes in train where one student builds upon the work of another. And then it comes back, and that's what our collaborative nature is, not the other way around.